thank you, Karsten, for taking the time to make this interview. And I just wonder if we could start, because here you are, you're the HR director of Danske Bank. Could you tell the viewer a little bit about how you got to be here? You know, a little bit about your career or your own journey so far.
Yes. Well, how do you get here? I think, I mean, I've been working with HR for almost my entire career. Actually spent the vast majority of my career in transportation, in logistics, shipping, and then after 8 years abroad, we decided to move back to Denmark, and then this opportunity came along, and I think Danske Bank is quite a significant institution, not only in Denmark but in the Nordics, with I think a very important role to play in society. And 3 years ago when I joined, also with a couple of challenges that were quite apparent. So when I got the opportunity to join, you know, an important institution, an interesting challenge, moving back to Denmark, it was just all kind of, I wouldn't say meant to be, but it at least it all fell in line, and this was then a decision we took as a family, and here I am.
And you've been the HR director for Danske Bank for 3 years now. Am I right?
Yes, 3 years and a few months.
And we heard from your CEO, Karsten Breum, him describing in his words the challenge of this particular time and what you're doing with the bank, and you're transforming it. I mean, could you say in your words, you know, what you see as the primary challenge is? And you might want to throw a sort of particularly a kind of HR or a people lens onto that, if you like. But I mean, over to you.
So if I was to just try to articulate what we're doing, I would almost say that we are retaking ownership of our agenda in the bank. I think for the last 3 to 5 years, to a large extent, the agenda has been defined by a number of challenges that the bank has had, issues from the past that we've had to deal with and clean up, resolve, and that has obviously moved a lot of energy towards those particular issues, whether we liked it or not, whether we felt that was you know, the direction the bank should move or not. That was the challenge. And now I think we are in a position where we can again, you know, look at the bank a little bit the way we want to, look at the outside world. We are in the process of creating a strategy that I think is one that we own much more ourselves, and I think that's probably at the heart of the change that we're going through right now.
So for you, it's about this being an opportunity to kind of claim or retake an agenda that was dictated by, in the last few years, has been dictated by the newspapers and by regulators. There have been certain consequences, haven't there, of the money laundering issues you've had. And I think I'm right in saying you've passed some key milestones of that, haven't you, where you've resolved some things and now you're able to set a new agenda.
Correct. Yes.
And, you know, so as you sort of lift your head up into that, what do you see as the purpose now of the bank and the purpose of you as a leader in that bank, leading the people function?
Well, I think the purpose of the bank is to play our role in society. I think any bank, but Danske Bank in particular, especially if you look at Denmark and the Nordic countries, play an extremely important role in stimulating growth, and obviously also being there for our customers. So that perspective out of the bank, rather than looking at ourselves and our issues with money laundering, etc., I think is a massive change. And if you look at that from a people's perspective, I also believe that that is highly energizing. I think it is an opportunity that we've been waiting for a long time, where we are not, where the agendas are not dictated by circumstances, but that we are taking owning and responsibility for how we want to grow, develop the bank. It's a different kind of conversation where you have more options. You can sense also that this is, I think, I would almost say it's ultimately about releasing potential in the bank that has been limited because of an agenda that we didn't define. Now we define the agenda, and now I think, and I'm hesitating a little bit because, of course, we're in the middle of all of this, right? So yeah. I don't want to, we're not claiming victory or anything like that, no. But we can certainly sense that there's a different level of lightness, I would almost say, in the bank, or we are getting there, right? From one where it was very almost imposed on us what the agenda looked like, to one where it's now more in our hands. And I think most people are also here because they truly believe that we as a bank can make a difference in society and for our customers, etc. And I think there's also a number of other emotions that are associated with the direction that we are moving in now. Pride, excitement, energy, which you don't find, I think, when you're just fixing things that that regulators and others demand of you.
Yeah. I mean, I really see that there is an energy comes, isn't there, when you deliberately choose something, like it's a consciously chosen thing, which is so at the heart of purpose, isn't it? Like you choose the purpose, as opposed to something where your mindset is, I'm having to do something that other people want me to do.
Yeah.
So I get the sense for you that this is a moment in time where people, even though you can choose that, you can actually choose, can't you? You can choose your own way of responding when you're being asked to do something. But this is a moment in time where the bank really has a chance to choose its purpose, to choose its way forward. And you feel the release of energy in that.
Yeah, I think that's probably at the heart of it, is this choice that I think the bank now has in terms of setting the agenda, the direction, the ambition. And I think it also, from my point of view, it releases a lot of energy. I think it opens up for collaboration in a different way than what we've seen before, because before it was more about fixing things. Now it is about more, creating things and creating things together.
Yeah.
So this, being driven much more by choice than something that you have to do, I think is probably at the heart of the transformation that we are going through.
And it's interesting to me, listening to you, Karsten, as a HR director, is I'm noticing this link, because obviously we know the bank's purpose is about releasing the potential of its customers, but you have that way of translating it to say, actually, the way we will do that is by releasing the potential in here of the people in here. Having that inside out approach, which is well researched, isn't it? You can't deliver something out to customers or to a marketplace if you're not living it inside.
Correct. So I think at the heart of what we do from a people agenda point of view is really that we try to create the conditions for people basically to be the best version they can be in the bank, to release that energy and potential. And of course, you approach that from many different angles. But at the end of the day, we have 20,000 people who every morning get up and go to work, and they can do that in a energized, motivated spirit, or they can do it because they have to, right? And then we are back to the choice. Are you here because you really feel you're making a difference? You basically see a purpose in what you do, and you can connect that purpose probably with something bigger than the task, the job that you do on a day-to-day basis. And I think by connecting those dots and making sure that people also see that kind of elevated purpose in the role that they have, I think that's where a lot of the energy sits that we basically can release.
So are you saying in that answer then that for you it all sort of simplifies down to across is it 20,000 people here? Across the 20,000 people, it's in some ways as simple as, are they coming to work with, on the one hand, a sort of very kind of like, I'm having to do, a sense inside them that they have to do this? Or are they coming into work with a sense of connection to, you called it an elevated purpose, a sense of choosing why they're here and what's meaningful for them? Are you saying that that's the essence of the difference that you're trying to create?
I think that is the essence. I'm not saying that you will never have a day or a task or a meeting that feels more like something you have to do, but fundamentally, and I think that is at the heart of it, is that most of what we do has a purpose, and it's connected with something else. It's not, there's probably a purpose in itself, but it's also connected to a bigger purpose. And I believe that if we can create that awareness in people and make them actually reflect more about what is actually the purpose. And purpose doesn't always have to be something big like, releasing the potential in our customers, or what is our role in society. There are also small purposes. There's a purpose in us sitting here having this conversation. There's a purpose in the meetings that you have in your calendar, the task that you're doing, and your ability to reflect on that and understand that it has a purpose in itself, but it probably also is connected with something which is also what I refer to as the elevated purpose, right? That's where I think a lot of the energy comes from, and the inspiration that we all need in our jobs. But I also think that's where we start to build better relationships in the bank, more collaboration, because my purpose is connected with your purpose when we elevate it. And I really think that there's a very, very strong opportunity for us in basically releasing potential if we create more awareness around it.
I mean, I think people are going to be very interested in your perspective, Karsten, as you've been in HR for a long time. You have this way of talking about purpose, and what I'm hearing you say is that it doesn't have to be grand things. There's purpose in most everything that we're doing. It's there, including like right now, there's a purpose in this conversation. Before we came on air, you were saying to me, like, you have got a purpose to help with these videos, to help me, so it was kind of, it's there, it's present. And what you're saying, it's about connecting to it. You connect to it, and often the purpose that's present in this moment actually connects to something bigger than yourself. I mean, am I getting the essence of what you're saying?
You're getting the essence, absolutely, and I believe that most of the time we may not be aware of it. We tend to more look at the task at hand, and it becomes something that is expected of us, and we do it. But the minute you build that purpose on top of it, you are also present in another way. You are listening in another way. You are building a bridge to, because most of us also, at least in Danske Bank, we don't do things on our own. We typically co-create and collaborate in order to get things done, right? And we are getting more and more dependent on each other. And the more you can bring the purpose into the middle of that collaboration, co-creation, and the relationships that we are all dependent on, the better I'm sure you will be able to create a meaningful result also.
I mean, to me, that speaks to the heart of purpose, the way you say it. I love the way you say it. It's like we can get very focused on the outcome, which is, let's just say, the what. And that's present, isn't it, in what we're doing? We're making a film now. You've just come from a meeting. You had a decision to reach. There's a what present. But what I'm hearing you say is that if you connect to the purpose behind creating that what, I think you said you become present in a different way and able to connect and collaborate more. And there's a different energy present when you have to say a why for that what. Am I getting the essence of what you're saying in that?
Yes, you are, and I think there's another dimension to it, because one thing is the positive when we then co-create and we collaborate in order to get the results. The other thing is that often, a big part of my job is actually resolving conflicts, right? Differences in interests or projects or collaboration or things that doesn't work, then it gets escalated and somehow I get involved or other. That's for, I think, all leaders, that's part of the job.
But particularly so as a HR director, you get even more of that.
Probably. Probably, yes.
Just to say it, yeah.
But where I want to get to is that you often forget then that people then, these conflicts stem from different purposes, right? And if you look at the purposes each individual bring to the table, in isolation, it probably makes sense. And you behave, you interact, you fight for a certain view because there's this purpose behind it. But the problem is, if you don't bring that purpose on the table, it is so much harder to resolve the conflict, right? Because you don't understand what is it actually that's going on in the background.
Yeah.
People are not stupid. People don't go to work in order to make it difficult for you and me to do our jobs, but they may have a different purpose. And again, coming back to this awareness around what are the purposes behind our behaviors, I think that is also a key to, resolving issues, differences in opinions, etc.
So you bring us in a conversation to that harder edge of business, which is very present, isn't it? It's not all generative and creating ideas. There's very often part of the landscape of running a successful business is disagreement, resolving conflicts, coming together with different opinions and making something of that. So you bring us to that real edge. And what you're saying is, it goes back to what you were saying before, is once you recognize that there's purpose present in everything, it doesn't have to be a big grand thing. It can be really, really granular in the micro. There's a purpose present. It's almost like you're saying there's a lens through which to see what's going on here. If you inquire into that. And actually what you're saying is it's much easier to be progressive, to create more, to collaborate, if you expose what are often left as unaware or unconscious purposes in the mix of it all.
Yes, and here is the dilemma, or the what's the word I'm looking for? Because the real what we often experience is that we believe, also as leaders, that we are expected to make fast decisions, be effective and efficient, and have an opinion and, resolve issues. And often we think we need to do that fast. You could argue sometimes that is also the case, but more often than not, if you do make decisions without really understanding what are the purposes at play that are driving our behaviors and the conflict in the first place, you don't really resolve it.
Yeah.
You give people an answer, a direction, a decision, but in the organization, the issue is still there because they still hold each their purposes and they're not really aware that, we're coming from it at two completely different angles. So I would argue that in 90% of the time, this investment in really trying to understand what is it that drives people, why is it that we are behaving the way we are, or see the world, or have the perspective that we have, opens up for a much more meaningful discussion and one that actually resolves the underlying differences rather than just what's going on the surface.
There's a word I'm very taken by, which is purposeful. I mean, it's a common word, isn't it? We use it a lot, but I think the way it's coming to my mind now, because I think the way you're speaking is about making things full of purpose. You're talking about don't leave that unsaid, because often we can be really unaware of that. And what you're noticing is that when it gets left unaware, you might resolve a sort of what here. You might make a decision and look good as a leader, or at least think you are, obeying the commands of being decisive and making a decision. But actually, you're not getting to the bottom of something because you're not exposing the purposes that are here. So I'm hearing you say that you make your conversations full of purpose, full of what are the purposes. Your purpose, my purpose. Okay, when that's known, we can now resolve something, really resolve it, or create something that might actually hold both of those purposes, actually hold both of them together.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I would also argue that most of the time, people will also accept your decision and still feel heard and understood if you know what is the purpose that has been in play in these conflicts or resolutions or issues that you're dealing with. If you just make decisions, then obviously I would argue most of the time people don't always feel heard, understood, or seen, which again often results then in, I will do it because I have to, rather than I do it because I choose to, because now we've actually had a meaningful discussion about, why we are having this issue in the first place. What am I trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? And why does that create a conflict, right? And sometimes we do have conflicting purposes, but just creating an awareness that that's what's in play here, that we actually want two different things. And maybe that is not something we can't achieve both. So then you definitely do need to make a decision, but at least you've put it on the table, you're open about it, you've heard the different perspectives.
I mean, you said earlier on something that struck me about you see your job as a HR director as creating the environment where people can give of their best, give their best selves. And I'm inferring from what you've been saying since then that part of giving their best selves is having the awareness of their own purposes, connecting to those, also having the awareness of colleagues and what their purpose is. So that's part of the process for you. But my question is, how do you do that? How do you create an environment or a culture where that inquiry into my purpose or my curiosity about your purpose is more likely to come out rather than stay in?
That's also quite a challenging task and an exciting journey that we started a couple of years ago. For me, it starts with leadership, and it starts with also creating an awareness in our leadership teams in the bank about exactly what we're talking about here. Most of the time, we human beings, leaders, we tend to react very much on some kind of automatic instinct, where we are not super reflected or aware of our way of interacting or making decisions or leading. I would almost say, it's almost like an autopilot most of the time. So I think if you really want to bring purpose into play in an organization, you need to start with some kind of realization that you need to be much more in control of how you lead, and that you actually have a choice between automatic reaction and then also one that is more reflected, because I don't think you can bring that purpose in play without more reflection in your leadership. So to give you a short answer, we've really invested in that leadership mindset in the bank to try to bring that awareness out, that you actually need to think about how you interact when you move into a meeting, when you have a discussion, when you resolve issues. How do you do that? And you have choices. You don't just always have to do it the mechanical way.
So what you're saying is that you recognize that as human beings and as leaders, we can be in a modality where we are operating on automatic, we're reactive, we're not really clear on what our purpose is for this conversation or this meeting or this conflict that needs to be resolved. And what you're doing as a bank directly is you're investing in your leaders so that they can notice that state and actually notice it and move into a different state where they are consciously choosing a purpose for themselves and choosing a purpose for the engagement that they're in. Is that what you're saying is how you're operationalizing this whole process?
Yes, and it probably comes back to what we discussed initially on the whole transformation that the bank has gone through, from doing things because we have to doing things because we choose to. And I think this journey is a journey for the bank, but it's also an individual journey. It's also something about just being more aware that we don't always have to do things just because we have to.
Yeah.
There's not much here in life that you have to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that in most walks of life, you have a choice.
Yeah.
You're just not always aware of it. So you and you get typically immediately emotionally influenced by circumstances, and that triggers a certain behavior without you actually realizing it.
Yeah.
And the more awareness we can bring into those reactions, the more you can elevate your purpose, the more conscious you can be about how you respond to a certain conflict or discussion or issue.
So to be a leader around here, it sounds to me like you are saying that you need to carry yourself with a high degree of self-awareness, and take responsibility for your awareness of when you're reactive, but also then being encouraged to come out into your leadership, not from a place of having to or thinking that you have to, but actually really fully claiming that you're choosing something, you're choosing this purpose, and actually even elevating that. So, I mean, is that the deal around here? If you come to lead here, that you're expected to have this engagement with your own self-awareness?
That is, I think, a pretty well articulated way of defining what the deal is, or at least what we strive to, because this is a journey. It's very hard. We will fail and we'll fall back into our old habits again and again and again. So, and all of that we have to create room and space for that. But I think for all of us, it's about every day trying a little harder, do a little bit better in trying to bring that, self-awareness with us in our jobs, in our interactions with others. And there's a lot of different ways where you can practice this, so it becomes more tangible also.
Yeah.
But yes, essentially, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that combination. It's a clear deal, but at the same time, it's kind of recognized that we're human and we're not going to be operating from an elevated purpose all of the time. So it's almost like you've got quite a nuanced message here, which is to say, look, this is what we expect of you, but it's really about an everyday engagement, and it's about improving and bringing something into your practice each day so that you can show up as best as you can.
Yeah, and I would argue that as a bank, we have traditionally been extremely task oriented. So this has been what defined us, what made us successful, and also individually, what was expected of us. And I think what I'm saying is that there's another energy almost in the organization when we start to put those tasks into a context of why we're doing it. Why does it make sense? What's the purpose? And connecting our task, because we all have tasks, but connecting that with a higher purpose, I think, is really where that energy and also the accountability lies. Because in itself, a task doesn't necessarily motivate you or, energize you to try harder or work closer or make sure we get over the finishing line. But if you start to connect it with a higher purpose, I think it's almost like there's also, I would say, there's almost also an emotional connection with this, right?
Yeah.
Because a purpose typically also I would associate with creativity, energy, success, things that you get energy from, whereas the task in itself rarely does that. It's only when you start to connect it with something more meaningful that you find that.
That's the human part, isn't it? Because the task is out there. What I'm hearing you say is when the task is there, when you bring your meaning to that, when you bring your purpose to it, that, in your experience, creates a whole new dimension of energy, connectivity, and even success, actually. But paradoxically, it creates more success because you've got that energy and meaning that is going to make your engagement with it that much more rich and full.
Yes, absolutely. And then I think the circle is back to probably the self-awareness, but also I think for us the awareness that we are changing, I think, a culture that has just defined how we've been working for many years. And we've been quite successful also in how we've worked also in the past. So it's also in many ways uncomfortable because this is me stepping into something that is new. I'm not sure that I will master it. I'm not sure that it will be looked at as something that is actually accepted around here, because you're really trying to push, I think, the way we behave, we lead, we interact in a way where you obviously have courageous first movers, but that's also why you need to start at the top of the organization, because the rest of the organization needs to see that there is something actually that is changing in the atmosphere and the way we work together.
So you characterizing this change as one, historically the bank has really been very task focused, which, you know, I'm using my language, but that's a what, isn't it? It's an outcome, it's a what. And what you're saying, it seems to me, is that you want to create more dimensionality to that. You're adding a why, but also you're speaking to a how. You know, you were talking about even if you make a decision that doesn't meet somebody's preference, if they've been listened to, if their purpose has been understood, if the engagement with them has been very full and connecting, then something changes in the way they accept that decision. So I think you're talking about a shift from what focus to actually having leaders who are working like a positive cycle of why, how, and what, why, how, and what. And that creating a very different culture in the bank, led from the top, led by leaders who are willing to bring that self-awareness, but also bring that awareness to these three dimensions rather than just deliver, deliver, deliver.
Absolutely, Darren, and listening to you speak, I would also say, and to a large extent, I also think we are laying the track for how it will be to work in Danske Bank also for the future. And I think the pressure on us, not only Danske Bank, but in general, the pressure on us as companies where you expect people to come, join, spend a not insignificant amount of time trying to deliver whatever it is we expect of people. The pressure on us to bring that purpose and meaning more in play is only going to increase. And I have a 17 and a 19-year-old child at home, and I am 100% sure that the expectations that they have and the way that they expect to, you know, be interacting with people in an organization like ours will be vastly different from when I joined the first company I started to work for. And I think being more explicit about purpose and meaning is going to be at the heart of that.
I mean, people, I know people watching this and people I've spoken to sometimes find this word purpose to be quite difficult one, a bit nebulous, hard to define. I mean, how do you define it? You know, what do you think purpose actually is? And by extension, I notice you're using the word elevated purpose or higher purpose. You know, you've clearly got some distinctions that mean something to you. So question in two parts. You know, what do you understand by it, and what makes a purpose higher or more elevated?
So the easy answer, of course, is to put the label why on something, that then you're at least on the right track in terms of purpose. Purpose, to some extent, will describe why you are doing what you're doing, why we are having this conversation, why you are having a meeting, and I think it's almost for me, purpose is probably associated also with some kind of outcome. And then it's associated with also an awareness that is more than the task. So when I talk about an elevated purpose, I think it is that a task in itself has a purpose, but it probably connects with something which is more fundamental for what my role is, what we want to do in the bank, why we have a leadership team, or whatever it might be that we are trying to achieve. I think it's hard to define what is an elevated purpose, but and I guess an elevated purpose is probably something that to me is more long term. It's more Hopefully it's also more meaningful, aspirational sometimes, also the more elevated it gets, versus a purpose that can be very concrete, that we have to resolve this specific challenge or disagreement or whatever it is. The elevated purpose, I think, gets a little bit more aspirational.
So there's things that there are dimensions to an elevated purpose. You're saying kind of like you're on the right track by asking the question why. That gets you on the right track. But something that makes it elevated is something that is more meaningful to you, might be of a longer term nature. And then I think you said something more aspirational even in it, so the sort of scale of it. So they're the ways that you think about an elevated purpose. And I suppose if I may, do you also mean that it's when you're saying connect, I read into that a purpose is about something more than just yourself. You know, it actually encompasses other people who are part of this, or the bank, or the customers, or society. It has a way of reaching beyond my pure self-interest.
And that's maybe I don't think you can underestimate how important that is, because there is probably no one in Danske Bank who's delivering something by themselves. I mean, we are all part of a network of intelligent, dedicated, motivated people, and ultimately whatever we do in order to serve our customers, be in society what we want to do, and also creating what we want to create for the organization. It's a range of connected people who have to work together. And I think what can bring these people together is that better understanding of the purpose of why we need each other, why what I do interferes with what you do, and what we need from each other in order to be successful.
As I'm listening to your words, you speak a lot about the task being one thing, but then almost like there's something that ripples out, that connects beyond just the task itself. And I've been reflecting as you're speaking, what is that? And the thing that comes into my mind is meaning. That the thing that connects out is the meaningfulness of that task, what its repercussions are, what's the consequences of it, who it touches. Do you think that's, I mean, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but is that what you mean when you're talking about the task ripples or it connects out? Was that your meaning?
Yes, I think you can say that. So purpose, I mean, it's almost, if purpose means something to you, if you can actually connect with the purpose, this is also where it starts to be meaningful. So again, a task without a purpose doesn't make a lot of sense. Then it's just something you do.
Very robotic.
It gets very robotic. It's something that I just need to tick the box. I do it. Yeah. Maybe I don't even know why I do it. I just do it because somebody told me to. It's expected of me. So in order to make sense of what I do, you have to connect it with a purpose. And I think in connecting it with a purpose, it's either something which is bigger than yourself, and typically it's something where, you know, it's connected with something other people also can see, do, contribute to. Yeah.
But what you're saying over and over is, when that happens, and it doesn't always happen, but when that happens, when somebody connects the task with meaning, with purpose, with that connection that you speak of, what you notice is that the presence changes, the energy changes, the connectivity, the creativity changes. So you're naming really substantial benefits to that process. Like you're claiming a lot for that alchemical moment.
And actually, we have 3 cultural commitments in the bank, and when we defined those cultural commitments, it was part of the transformation that we've been going through the last 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
and it was not as clear. But the more we work with it, and they are be open, team up, and own it. And I would say what brings this to life to a large extent is purpose. If you want people to own something, take responsibility for something, feel accountability, if you haven't got some kind of purpose to connect it with, it is very hard to ask people actually to own something. If you want people to team up, but you don't have a shared purpose to team up, if it's only about something that you want, and I don't understand why that's important to you, where you're coming from, and it doesn't reflect my purpose, or at least I can see what is the bigger purpose of us teaming up, it will also be meaningless. And then we're back to the meaning. And the last part about being open, I think, is the third cultural commitment. And for me, being open is also a outcome of having a purpose. Because if it's just the task again, I don't need to be very open about that. I can do that, tick in the box, and we move on. But if you want to connect it with a purpose, then you have to start opening up for why does this purpose actually make sense? Do we share the purpose of whatever it is we are collaborating, interacting about? So I think purpose really is a prerequisite almost for us to bring those cultural commitments to life in the organization.
I'm imagining here that what you're saying is very interesting to people who are watching, who have very likely experienced once or many times over in work life, either being on the receiving end or designing values or cultural commitments is your particular way of saying them, or other, mission statements or worthy, well-intentioned things. And what I hear you saying to them in this moment is, actually, they're all well and good, but actually they don't come to life unless purpose is present inside them. And you gave different nuances to your three cultural commitments, but basically saying, if there isn't a purpose present, then people aren't going to own things. They won't, if without that purpose, there's nothing really much to open up about, because it's so quintessentially human, isn't it, for us to have our meanings and our different purposes and things. So you're really speaking about purpose as the prerequisite, the key that unlocks culture, the key that unlocks the way people can work with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just sitting here reflecting on it and having this conversation, it's almost reminding me why it is that we have invested so much in creating a higher awareness about bringing purpose into our leadership, into the bank, into what we do. Again, the small things as well as the big things.
Yeah. Well, that comes back to what you were saying earlier on. There's purpose in everything, small and large. And your encouragement to really connect to the purpose in the everyday. It's not just for big things or big occasions or grand designs. It's really in the everyday. That's where it comes to life.
Yes. And that's easy to say. It's a lot harder to do. It's especially hard when you're under pressure, when things get difficult, when you have disagreements, etc., because then you tend to react more on autopilot. And this is especially where you need to say, okay, let's just take a step back and try to figure out what is the purpose that is present here. Yeah. So the more difficult things get, the more important it is also to really bring that reflection into a conversation.
Yeah. If you're anything, I completely get what you're saying, by the way. There are times when it's harder to be consciously purposeful, to choose your purpose, particularly when pressure's on or you're feeling emotionality. But if you're anything like me, it's actually those moments where really you do actually need that awareness even more, because when I get reactive into those situations, I'm almost always making things worse, or actually creating a situation that needs even more of my time to make right or resolve, because I said that thing or I did that thing.
And absolutely, and I think on the journey that we've been on, and that I have been on also, it's actually quite satisfying when you get that moment of awareness that, hey, right now I'm actually walking down that path of autopilot where I'm just trying to make it, my way, and really not listening anymore. And that's where you get a chance to take a step back and just reflect a little bit more on how you respond to whatever challenge or discussion is taking place in the room. And it's interesting for me. It's definitely very present in work, but it's also present at home around the dinner table, right? With two teenagers, it happens every day. Yeah. They have often very different purposes in the conversations that we have over the dinner table.
Really get what you're saying, but I mean, without getting too philosophical about it, I think there's something that you're saying here about the human condition, isn't it? Which is that at every moment there's a fork in the road or a choice where we can take the reactive path, the reactive choice. And sometimes that seems really tempting. But what you're saying is it's really satisfying when you have that moment of self-awareness and you do actually, you don't react, but rather you choose your purpose, you choose your response. And I guess in some ways what you're talking about in your work with the bank here is sort of increasing the number of those moments, because you're not going to have them all the time. Increasing the number of those moments, or increasing the self-awareness, so that when you're in that crucible, or when the pressure's on, you've got more of a chance of being aware and choosing that rather than just going into the automatic.
Yeah, you have a choice. That's back to the choice again. And I think another thing, Darren, is that we've spoken a lot about the self-awareness and, being aware of my own purpose and why am I here. But I think that it's equally important that you can also actually invest time, energy in understanding what other purposes are at play here. So really try to understand if you are in a meeting and there are different opinions, then invest time in understand where does that come from? What is ultimately, the purposes that are in play here, resulting in us obviously having very different opinions about certain things. And so I think there's a self-awareness about what's my purpose and how do I bring myself into a discussion or a meeting. But there's also, and maybe that is even more important actually, the more I think of it, trying to understand what are the other purposes that are actually sitting around the table here.
And by extension, one of the things I know you've started to develop in your ELT, in your leadership team, is not just taking responsibility for your own state and whether you're reactive and limited or whether you're, choosing it and responsive, but actually you've started, if I understand you right, as a team, to start looking at each other and noticing each other's states and being encouraging of each other, so that you're actually also invested in getting the best out of each other, encouraging each other to not be reactive, but rather to be purposeful.
Yeah, we have, as part of this whole journey and investment and transformation, we've actually started to, so all our meetings in the executive leadership teams actually start with a short check-in, exactly to just, and it sometimes sound very simple, but I truly believe that it actually has quite an impact, that we get a chance to just hear from everybody, what are their state of mind, before we go into often difficult, challenging discussions. But you just connect, you connect as human beings, you recognize that, you're more than just a chief people officer, and and there's more than just the job at play often, right? So the state of mind is often a combination of a lot of things, you know. What was the morning, you know, and other things that's going on my mind, private, professionally. And I think that creates just a better environment, a more open environment also for the rest of the discussions that we are going to have.
I mean, I know from my career that this work of being purposeful, like you said, there are some people who naturally take to it more, or more the sort of early adopters of something, and there are others who find it more difficult or more challenging, or perhaps are more wedded to an idea that business should be more about the task, actually. So can you talk to us about how have you noticed that here in your own transformation journey, and how have you approached that difference between those who, you know, I mean, since you really get this, you've got an experience, otherwise you wouldn't be able to say what you're saying, but I'm sure you've got colleagues who are less able to make that connection. How have you approached that?
So again, I think first of all, you really need top leadership buy-in to a transformation like this, because you're going to go through a transformation that is really difficult, and that takes time. So we've invested in the leadership team. We've started top down. We've also acknowledged that we are different, and for some of us it is more uncomfortable than others to start opening up and, you know, connecting with each other more as human beings, whereas, you know, we are used to connecting as professionals. Then I would say we've also had a lot of discussions about how far can you push this agenda, because I think if you push it too far, you risk losing the organization, and then it becomes this HR, fluffy, philosophical initiative where I don't see myself as part of that journey. So it has to be constructively challenging and uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable that people, you know, basically resign and say, you know, this is not for me. And then I think we've also invested quite a bit in a number of offsites where we brought leadership teams together to experience this, working with you guys, obviously quite a bit to, I think, make it an experience. I don't think you can learn this without actually feeling what it does to you. And I have, there was an old colleague of mine who said that it's sometimes it feels like being 20 kilos lighter once you've actually engaged in the kind of tools that you can use to connect with people also on at a deeper level and on a more human level, but also, you know, in a purposeful way.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're feeling for that sweet spot where there's constructive challenge, but it's not sort of mandated so far as to kind of, you know, put people out of their comfort zone so much, you know, where it's just creating resistance or creating, I can't do this, I can't stay in this. That's the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot we're looking for, and then I think we've kind of looked at this also as a phased approach. I mean, we probably spent 2 years on this now, and I think we are starting to see the results and the changes, but we definitely have a long way to go still. Also because you ultimately want this to be a part of the culture in the bank, and that's a difficult change.
You were speaking earlier on, if I could sort of change tack a little bit, you were speaking earlier on about your children, and, you know, you were really clear that the world of work is changing. There's much more of a want for work to be purposeful on their terms. Um, I think there are going to be people watching who are curious about your views about how you shape a HR function into that, and what you consider to be the role of purpose in designing a HR function, a people function, which is your responsibility to do. How do you see that challenge, and in what ways is purpose coming in to shape the way that is approached?
Well, first of all, I think that you're constantly dealing with things that you need to respond to today, issues, expectations, changes, deliverables. And at the same time, you constantly need to think about where do you want to be and where do you need to be 5 years, 10 years down the road. So I think we are operating with those two lenses in how we work. We are very conscious of creating or how are we going to create a workplace that is vibrant, attractive for 20,000 employees, both today but also 10, 20 years down the road. And here I think it's this balance between where we are coming from and what the expectations are when you look at generations of young people that are joining the labor market and Danske Bank now and in the future. And I think their expectations are just different. I think they are going to be more selective. They're going to have different expectations to us as leaders in the bank and how we are going to invest in their learning and their growth. I think they're perfectly fine also with us having high expectations. I think they're not shy or afraid of committing to expectations. They want to make a difference, and they want to see, first of all, their role in the context of a purpose and as meaningful. You may not join the bank and immediately see, how you are making a huge difference, but you will and you want to be able to see how what I do connected to again this higher purpose that we spoke about earlier.
How do you do that? How do you help people make that connection between the higher purpose of the bank and what I actually am doing?
Well, I think you first of all you need to create an awareness again about purpose, because if you don't talk about it, if you're not aware that we want to create that connection to a purpose, then I think it will be impossible for people to see it and to connect with it. So I think at the heart of this is some kind of awareness, and then you're back to the investments that we're making in leadership and I would also argue that we've got a number of processes that are owned in HR, where we are getting better and better at connecting, conversations that we have within the bank to purposes, and that could be, performance reviews. It could be our culture and engagement surveys. They are all processes and tools that we have introduced in the bank that are basically tools for conversations. Conversations about what is expected of me, conversations about, how do we create an environment where it's energizing and motivating to work. So these are tools that are basically stimulating conversations, and we want purpose to be present in those conversations.
So what I'm picking up, let me see if I'm getting the threads to answer this question I have, which is about the creation of a modern HR function which is purposeful and helps people in the organization to be purposeful. I'm picking up three things. One is you're saying leadership is absolutely essential. So you're really investing in leadership that knows how to be purposeful, not just of myself, but supporting those around, colleagues around. So that's sort of like one pillar. The second pillar I'm hearing you mention now is you're being very, very conscious about the processes that you have in the bank. You're sort of hardwiring elements of HR, and in the design of those, having conversations that can encourage people to be purposeful. That sounds like it's like a second pillar for you. And then the third one, you didn't say this specifically, but I think it's sort of underneath what you've been saying is you've been saying about illuminating purpose in conversation. And I'm wondering if the third leg of it somehow is about HR professionals seeing their role as facilitators of purpose and having the skills to help the people that they're interacting with uncover purpose, bring to life unconscious purposes, and even then have the skills to enable people to elevate those purposes so they become more meaningful. And we know when things become more meaningful, there's more energy released. So I'm seeing those three things. I mean, am I getting you, what you're saying about the role of HR, or am I missing something in that?
No, I think that's, and you obviously, you also have quite some insights. So we've definitely also made investments in the HR organization, and I would probably label it scalability, because we've spoken a lot about the leadership aspects of creating purpose in how we work, but I would say we obviously have 21,000 or 20,000 employees, and that scalability comes partly also from leveraging the HR organization and making sure that we have HR partners, ambassadors who can facilitate the kind of discussions that we're looking for. But we're also looking at critical teams that we know are critical for the bank, that will be looked at also as defining the culture that we want in the bank, and then investing in those critical teams. So I would say that the third part is probably scalability, and bringing our focus on purpose and our culture out in the organization. And I would also say the whole pipeline of talent management, promotions, succession planning, bringing our responsive leadership DNA into those processes. Who are the future leaders in the bank? What are we looking for when we build a pipeline of leaders? And you're right, it goes all the way back to recruitment. Can we bring this into our recruitment process, and then the early developers and then the whole leadership pipeline of the bank. For me, that's another process in HR that is critical for us also to integrate with our leadership DNA and our purpose.
And I really sort of, if you've got examples of where you think that comes to life, how does or can purpose play a role in recruitment? How can it play a role in your talent pipelines? How can you build that into these? They can be quite multifaceted processes, can't they?
Yeah, but I think first of all, you really have to have a conversation about what are you looking for. Obviously, you purpose is not a skill or a capability. It's an awareness. It's something that you've got to have some observation points about a leader where you can see that here's someone that is actually reflecting, that is able to put things into a context of meaning and purpose, and And I think generally also doing things because they choose to rather than just because they have to. So what are the kind of conversations you have with the talents in your organization? It's hard to just put it on in a formula. It's something that you need to train and really be open about what is it that you're looking for. And then we have conversations, obviously, at a senior leadership level, where we also try to challenge each other about both all of the good things that an individual has delivered, but maybe even more important, how are things delivered, right?
I just wonder, Karsten, if we're actually in a period of time where we're sort of on the way to defining purpose as a capability. I mean, you said just now it isn't, but I mean, we put things like commercial awareness as a capability, don't we? And I'm wondering if actually we would develop the skills that go with purpose more, accelerate that process if we actually really did treat it as a capability. Because I think, I mean, to me, a lot of the things you're talking about here do have a competency in them. They have a capability in them. Yeah. And, maybe that's what we're moving towards, is actually really recognizing this crucial human dimension of business, which is this whole area of how we release, facilitate, connect to the meaning in things, because it's got such a power in it. As you said, it has so much power and energy in it. Why not? Why not treat that as a capability, take it seriously, and start actually really evaluating people and building their skills on that capability to do that?
And I think you're onto something, and I think that's very meaningful, purposeful, and I think there are different capabilities underneath, being purposeful. Yeah. And I think it is about understanding what does it require actually. And I don't want to claim, that we can sit here and define the solution. But I think this self-awareness piece, the capability, that's closer to a capability, is being self-aware and the ability to actually reflect on my own decisions and behavior and how I walk into a room. And I think that's one of the key capabilities in becoming more purposeful.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think also then beyond that, I think is the one you were mentioning earlier, which speaks more to, we're actually in this bank, but in most organizations you don't do very much on your own. It's connective. And so I think I was hearing you name those capabilities of looking across the room, of really being aware of what state your colleague is in, of being able to support them or facilitate them to speak to their purpose. Now, some people have got that, haven't they? They've got that ability to have people feel comfortable to open up. Whereas some people, they speak to you, you just feel yourself like I'm clamming up, not opening up. So I think that more otherly capability is part of this as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually the more I think of it, maybe we could actually come up with a couple of key elements that would define, working in a more purposeful way, and what would be the drivers of that, or the capabilities that we want to see.
Yeah. Well, I think part of this video series is about encouraging the viewers to do that as well. There are going to be people watching this who are holding this, and I think what you're speaking to today is, you speak, I think, very, very passionately and eloquently about the self capabilities, about the capabilities with others, but also about how purpose sets a context of meaning at an organizational level. And I think those three dimensions is what we're wanting in this series to encourage, is for people to say, well, what are they? How do we bring purpose to life in the self, in our collaboration with others, and for our organizations? I think if we can get those three things moving and people developing their experiences, we're really going to move this whole area of meaningful work forward. That's my sense of it.
Yeah. And as long as you don't make it sound easy, then I fully agree. Because I really think the other dimension of this is it requires hard work and really people to also step out of their comfort zone and start to fundamentally reflect about why we do things the way we do. And obviously for some people that is an easy journey, but for it to stick and be part of a lasting change in an organization, it really requires a commitment and hard training.
Yeah. Maybe the best we can offer is to make it more simple, but never easy.
Yes, true.
Thanks, Karsten. Really, thank you for sharing all your insights. It's been wonderful talking to you.
As always.
Yeah.
Likewise, Darren. Thank you.
Thank you.